All right, Bobby's back, and I almost passed on this one. Because if you read the first line out loud, it sounds like every soap opera you've ever scrolled past. Sister sleeps with sister's guy, everybody cries, roll credits. But that is not the story. I need you to trust me on that. The story is how long one woman sat perfectly still, smiling at a dinner table, letting an entire family believe she was fine, while she quietly assembled the one thing nobody at that table ever expected her to bring to a holiday. Not a speech, not a scene, a folder. Receipts. The boring, devastating kind. On Bobby, let's get into it. Picture a woman. I'll call her Wendy. Early 30s, lives down near Sarasota, one of those waterfront adjacent towns where every house is almost on the water and every car payment quietly disagrees. And Wendy works at a title and escrow company. Hold on to that job, because the job is the entire spine of this thing. Wendy spends 40 hours a week reading the fine print everybody else initials without looking. Deeds, liens, who actually owns a thing versus who just believes they do. She's the quiet person at the closing table who notices the one clause that's going to save your life or end it. And a brain wired like that does not clock out at 5. Now, Wendy has a younger sister, Brooke. And Brooke is the golden one. Louder, prettier in the way that photographs well and wears thin in a room, and gifted with one rare talent. Never, not once in 30 years, being held responsible for anything she did. The parents, Gary and Linda, have spent 3 decades as Brooke's full-time translation service. She's just spontaneous. She didn't mean it like that. You know how sensitive she is. You know the type. And the family ran on one unwritten rule. The rule a lot of families like this run on. Whoever points at the problem becomes the problem. And Brooke had a hobby. Brooke collected the men Wendy dated. And I don't mean once. I don't mean a drunk mistake at a wedding. I mean a pattern, going all the way back to high school. Wendy brings someone around, and within a few weeks, Brooke's texting him, just being friendly. A little after that, he's confused. A little after that, he's gone. And Brooke loses interest the same afternoon. Because the having was never the point. The taking was the point. There was the college boyfriend who suddenly needed space. There was the guy Wendy brought to a cousin's wedding, who spent the whole reception finding reasons to be wherever Brooke was standing. There was one Wendy dated for almost a year, who Brooke ran into so many times it stopped qualifying as a coincidence. 7, by Wendy's own count. 7. And every single time, the family verdict came back word for word identical. Wendy was too sensitive, and Brooke was just being Brooke. So Wendy learned to stop saying anything out loud, which it turns out is a completely different skill from learning to stop noticing. So Wendy finally gets engaged to a guy named Derek, and the family throws one of those little dusk things at the lake house. Paper plates, citronella, somebody's speaker propped in a window. And Wendy walks out to the pool house to grab the spare cooler and finds Derek and Brooke in there, not talking. And here's the part that tells you everything you'll ever need to know about Wendy. She doesn't scream. She doesn't throw a drink. She looks at the two of them for about 3 seconds, says, "Burgers are almost ready," and walks back to the party. And that calm, I need you to hear me, that calm was not peace. That was the sound of a woman who just quietly stopped being the audience to her own life. Now here's what almost everybody does in that exact pool house moment. They confront. They scream his name. They They post the cryptic story with one tear emoji. They call their mom from the car. And in a family like Wendy's, the machine just roars to life. Everybody tells you to lower your voice. Somebody says, let's not ruin the holidays. Somebody asks if you've thought about how this affects your mother. And 6 weeks later, you're the bitter, dramatic one. And Brooke has really grown from it. Wendy had watched that exact movie 7 times. She knew the ending by heart. So she did something else entirely. She drove home. She poured exactly 1 glass of wine. She opened her laptop, made a new folder, and gave it the most aggressively boring name she could think of. Closing docs. And I'm sitting here when I get to this part just going, of course she filed her own heartbreak under closing docs. The woman labels revenge like it's a property transfer. And then she started dropping things into it. Screenshots of texts between Brooke and Derek that Derek left wide open on a shared tablet on the kitchen counter. Because Derek, like every man in this story, believed with his whole heart that delete and gone are the same word. They are not, Derek. Dates. A hotel receipt off the joint card from a weekend he swore he was helping a buddy move a couch. None of it loud. None of it a scene on its own. Just the small, boring stuff that means nothing alone and everything in a stack. And Wendy has spent an entire career learning that a neat stack of boring documents is the most dangerous object in any room. And then she did the thing only Wendy would think to do. She stopped looking at Derek and she started pulling paper on her sister. Because 2 years before any of this, Brooke had gone through a divorce from a man named Jason. And that whole thing had always sat just slightly crooked with Wendy, the way a picture frame sits crooked. Brooke had walked out of that marriage telling everyone she got nothing, that Jason took her to the cleaners, that she was starting over with a suitcase. But Wendy reads settlements for a living, and she remembered one detail nobody else ever cared about. Brooke never actually showed up to that divorce. She skipped mediation, she let half of it ride to default, she signed whatever her lawyer mailed over, posted a quote about new beginnings, and went straight to brunch to tell everyone how brave she was being. At the time, Wendy chalked it up to Brooke being Brooke, allergic to consequences, allergic to paperwork. But now, sitting in front of that closing docs folder, she started asking a very different question. What does a person skip an entire courtroom to keep out of the record? So while the whole family is busy treating the pool house thing as a tiny hiccup, Wendy, honestly, they were just talking. Don't make it a whole thing. Wendy is very quietly becoming a problem none of them can see coming yet. And the only honest way I can describe how she worked is this. You know how on a warm night you can sit on a dark porch and look across the water at a house all lit up on the far bank? You can see them moving around inside, the blue flicker of the TV, somebody opening the fridge, standing in the light of it, deciding against it, closing it again. The whole little quiet drama of a life, and the people in there have no idea at all that anyone is out there in the dark, on the other side of the water, perfectly still, watching the entire thing. That is how Wendy moved. Lights off on her side. Patient. Comfortable in the dark in a way that should have scared every single person in her family, if any of them had been paying attention. First, she handled Derek. Now, Wendy and Derek weren't married, but they shared a lease, and there was a condo. A little rental unit Wendy's grandmother had left her that Wendy had let Derek's name slide onto during a refinance the year before, back when she still thought they were forever. A rookie move, and she knew it the second she'd done it. So she called a real estate attorney, not in a rage, for cleanup. Quit claim deed to pull Derek's name. Refinance back into her name only. A clean, dated record of exactly when Derek went from co-owner to occupant. Which, if you don't read these for a living, sounds like nothing. And is in fact the whole ballgame. Slow, boring surgical paperwork. The kind that doesn't feel like a weapon right up until the afternoon it absolutely is one. And here's the part one loves. While Wendy's quietly filing, Brooke gets cocky. Brooke starts texting Derek more, not less. Starts swinging by Wendy's place to drop off Mom's Tupperware on the exact days she knows Wendy's at work. And in the texts, which I'm paraphrasing because I'm not reading the real ones out loud, Brooke is telling Derek that Wendy is the safe option, and she, Brooke, is the real thing. Brother, you left a written record with a woman whose entire profession is written records. You didn't have an affair? You filed one. And Derek's doing that thing weak men do, where he texts Brooke, "I don't want to hurt her." My guy, you're so far past that exit, you can't see it in the mirror anymore. You're not avoiding hurting her, you're stalling, so you can keep both and feel conflicted about it on the drive home. Then Wendy pulls one last thread on Brooke's old divorce, and she finds it. In that default settlement, Brooke had signed a sworn financial disclosure under penalty of perjury, and it was clean. Way too clean. No mention of a side savings account that Wendy knew existed because Wendy had literally sat next to her and helped her open it. No mention of a car Brooke had quietly held onto and retitled. No mention of the chunk of money Gary and Linda had floated her that year and quietly written off. Brooke had lied on a sworn form to a court 2 years earlier. And she'd gotten away with it for exactly one reason. Nobody who knew the truth had ever been in the room. Until now. And here's the move that I genuinely didn't see coming. Wendy did nothing. For almost 2 months, she did absolutely nothing. She let the holidays pass. She smiled at the dinners. She let Brooke keep getting comfortable. Let Derek keep stalling. Let the whole family relax back into the comfortable old story that Wendy had quietly accepted her place again. The safe one, the sensitive one, the one who lets things go. 2 months of the calmest, most patient nothing you have ever seen in your life. And I'm telling you, that nothing is the scariest part of this whole story. Because the file wasn't finished. And Wendy does not file half a deal. Now, the move. This is where Wendy stops being patient and starts being surgical. Wendy works around attorneys all day, and one of them, a property and family law guy named Adam, quiet, mid-40s, the kind of man who says maybe 9 words at a closing and means all 9, had, 2 years back, handled the other side of Brooke's divorce, the asset division. Adam ran every bit of it on paper, through Brooke's lawyer, by mail, and by email, because, say it with me, Brooke never showed. And that one fact does 2 enormous things. 1, Adam knew in itemized detail exactly what Brooke had buried in that settlement. And 2, Brooke had no idea what Adam looked like. She had never sat across a table from him, never had to. To Brooke, Adam was just a signature on the far end of a process she couldn't be bothered to attend. The very thing she did to dodge accountability, skipping the room, is the exact thing that left her blind to the one face in the world she should have memorized. You see where this is going. So Wendy asks Adam to come to a family thing. Not officially as a setup against anyone. Officially, he's just Wendy's new guy. A quiet month after the engagement to Derek evaporated and the family started circling, dying to know who was next. And here is the truly elegant part. Wendy does not tell Adam to do a single thing. She doesn't hand him a script. She doesn't ask him to bring anything up. She just knows her sister. She knows that the instant a calm, presentable man walks into a room on Wendy's arm, Brooke will not be able to stop herself. Because Brooke has never actually wanted any of those men. Brooke wants whatever Wendy has. That is the entire engine of this woman, and it is run clean for 30 years. And I'm sitting there going, this isn't a trap with a trigger and a tripwire. There's no confrontation she has to stage. This is a trap built entirely out of the other person's character. Wendy didn't have to push Brooke into anything. She just had to open a door, step back into the dark, and let Brooke walk through it the exact same way she always does. The occasion is Gary and Linda's anniversary. Backyard, on the water, string lights strung through the palms, the rented table, Linda's good plates, a warm Gulf Coast evening that smells like salt and citronella. And Brooke performs, right on schedule, like she's reading off a card she's used 7 times. By the second drink, she's orbiting Adam. By the third, she's found 2 separate reasons to touch his arm. And eventually she peels him off toward the dock, away from the lights, out where the water's just black and moving, and she runs the play. The Wendy's sweet, but honestly, between us, she's not really your speed play. Wendy's the kind of woman you settle for. The whole monologue. And Adam just lets her talk, doesn't interrupt, lets her warm all the way up, lets her get specific, lets her brag. And she does brag, the way Brooke always eventually brags, about how she always lands on her feet financially, how she walked out of that marriage with a lot more than people think. He lets her hang every last inch of rope. And then, very politely, almost gently, Adam sets his drink down on the railing and says, "Right, Jason's divorce. I handled the property side of that. Funny, we never actually met." And you can watch the color leave Brooke's face in real time, out there on the dock, under the string lights, at her own parents' anniversary, with the black water moving behind her. Now, and this matters, nothing explodes that night. This is the part TV always gets wrong. Real life is quieter and so much worse. Nobody gets dragged across the lawn by their hair. The party ends. People find their shoes and drive home. But a few weeks later, Jason, Brooke's ex, gets a very dry, very boring email. No accusations, no exclamation points, just a clean side-by-side. What Brooke swore she had, under oath, versus what the paperwork shows she actually kept. And Jason's lawyer does exactly what a lawyer does the second he smells sworn misrepresentation in a financial disclosure. They file to reopen. And reopening a settlement on fraud is not a weekend. It's depositions, it's financial discovery, It's the next year of Brooke's life spent in beige conference rooms explaining text messages and bank records to people in suits who are paid not to find her charming. And the condo? Derek comes home one afternoon to find his stuff in labeled boxes on the landing, a printed notice taped to the door, and the slow, sinking realization that the refinance paperwork he never bothered to read makes that unit 100% Wendy's. He calls his own lawyer, all fired up, ready to fight. His own lawyer reads it, sighs, and tells him to let it go before he embarrasses himself. Now, here's where I'd love to tell you the family finally woke up. They did not. You want to know Gary and Linda's takeaway from all of it? That Wendy was vindictive. That Wendy weaponized private information. That Wendy humiliated the family at an anniversary. Not Brooke, who slept with the fiancé and lied to a court under oath. Wendy, the one who never raised her voice one single time. Because the family rule never changed, not for a second. The person who exposes the mess is the one who made it. And I'm sitting there going, these people watched a woman calmly hand them the truth in a folder with dates and signatures, and somehow decided the folder was the crime. So, no, Wendy didn't get the tearful apology. She didn't get the redemption dinner where everyone finally realizes they had her wrong all along. What she got instead was a sister about to spend a year of her life in those conference rooms, an ex-fiancé who lost a condo he never actually owned, and parents who, last anyone heard, still quietly send Brooke money. And honestly, Wendy seems completely fine with that trade. A year on, she's moved across the bay. Smaller place, quieter, still on the water. She likes the water, always has. Low contact with the family now. Not some dramatic door-slamming cutoff that gives everybody a scene to complain about, just fewer and fewer calls picked up. The slow kind of goodbye that doesn't leave a mark anyone can point to.
And Adam? No. Before you fill the comments, no, they did not ride off into the sunset. He sent her a holiday card. Professional courtesy. That is the entire romance, start to finish. I know you wanted it. It's just not that kind of story. And honestly, that's kind of the whole point.
Because here's what this one was really about. Brooke spent her entire life believing the loudest person wins the room. And for 30 years, she was right. It worked. Every dinner, every boyfriend, every sworn form, nobody bothered to check. It worked. Right up until the night she ran the play one time too many. On the one person in her life who never once needed to get loud. Because that person was too busy reading the fine print. Quiet paperwork, loud consequences. That's the one. If it landed, you know what to do. Like it, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one. Bobby's out.